Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I am so excited for today's video because I am going to be sharing with you my ultimate summer reading guide slash book recommendations for the summer. I feel like a lot of the time when I go to look for recommendations like this, there are just an overwhelming amount of books to choose from, and sometimes it can be hard to figure out what exactly you like to read, what you want to read, and maybe decision paralysis for lack of a better word. So I have decided to keep this video to only 2 book recommendations per category so that if you prefer a certain category, you can get at least something from this video. First of all, I am going to be talking about how to get the most out of your reading this summer before I jump into the actual book recommendations. And the first thing that I need to talk about is I discovered this guy, his name is Steven, on Instagram. Basically, he created a personality test for reading, and what is super cool about the concept of this particular personality test is that it is about so much more than just figuring out what genre you like to read. It's really getting to the heart of what do you want to get out of the books that you read? What do you want to receive from the books? What kind of things do you like to be in books? And the answer is going to be very specific to you, but the thing that's really cool about this read your color test is that most people can find those kinds of concepts that they love in any category, and so he's really trying to educate people on how to really figure out what they like to read and helping them branch out into reading other genres and things that they might not have ever tried if they didn't know the things that they like out of their reading. If that makes any sense, you need to go down to the read your color test. I am going to put the link in my bio. You have my permission to even pause this video or exit out of it so that you can go do that test. It took me less than 2 minutes to do. At the end of the test, it'll tell you what color you are, and it'll give you a few reading suggestions per color, and you can also explore all the colors and all the things on the website. But I have found that when I did that test, it was extremely accurate to what I really love and what I've actually been discovering over the past 1.5 years in my reading life. This is a very simple way to figure that out without spending 1.5 years like I have done with figuring out what I really love in books and why I read so diversely. So having said all of that, go take that test. Let's get into the video. All right, here are 3 things that I think you should consider if you want to get the most out of your reading life this summer. The first one is to lower your expectations for your reading life. Lower the expectation that you're gonna read 1 million books in one summer. The fact is that maybe you can actually read 1 million books in one summer, but are you really enjoying each one? Are you really getting into the story and letting it kind of soak in and simmer and being fully immersed into that story? For me personally, when I'm reading books that cause me to slow down a little bit and really ponder, I feel like I get more out of the book. And obviously, there are books that are meant to be a little fast-paced, like thrillers and mysteries and things like that. But I guess what I'm just saying is, if you go into the summer thinking you're gonna read 1 million books and you don't, then you could be met with disappointment. Whereas if you go into the summer just picking a handful of books that you might want to get to, and then at the end of the summer being pleasantly surprised by how much you do read and how much you actually enjoy your reading life, I feel like the second might be a better experience overall. The second thing that you should consider this summer is change up your location. And what I mean by that is, yes, having a reading chair or a reading corner is super fun and cozy, but you might get bored just sitting in the same spot over and over and over. Pick some different spots in your house that you can read in. You could go outside, you could take your book to the pool. If you're going on a vacation, take your books on vacation, read in the car. Maybe you get to your location 15 to 20 minutes before your appointment so that you can read in the car before your appointment. Or listening to an audiobook while you're in the car 100% counts as reading. So just think creatively about the timing and where you're reading so that you have a more well-rounded experience. The third thing is I want to encourage you to read something new. This could be a new genre, a new type of book that you have never read before, something to kind of change the pace of what you're reading. Now, I'm all for obviously knowing what kinds of books that you like and reading a lot of those things so that you know you're gonna love the book, but I feel like there's an element to reading nowadays where it's all about just the numbers, checking things off, not really paying attention to what you're reading. Whereas if you read something new, it's gonna cause you to kind of think about what you're reading, to consider the lessons and implications of whatever you're reading for your own life. I think that there can be a lot of fun and joy in getting out of your comfort zone with your reading. Not every single book, but just one or two books that are a little different that you might feel a little iffy about because they could really surprise you. And I think that having a pleasant surprise, when I look back on my summer's reading, or honestly any time of year, I love when I'm pleasantly surprised by a book. It really broadens my horizon with the things that I think that I will enjoy. As a bonus, changing your environment as far as location is great, but also adding to the environment. Like maybe you could light a candle or put a playlist on. I love having instrumental music in the background while I'm reading, and there's different types of instrumental music. It's not just like classical, which is great, but I've personally created a reading playlist that I have called Dear Reader. The link will be in the description of this video if you want to listen to it, and I find that the type of music in there works for almost any genre. I also have two other playlists that I have found on Spotify, something like that to really set the tone for your reading, not just sitting there to check it off, but actually enjoying sitting there with your book can really make all the difference at times. The other thing that I want to talk about is that audiobooks 100% count as reading. If you are a busy person, if you're a busy mom, if you have a lot of driving to do this summer, or you're traveling or whatever, maybe the only time you could actually read is in the car, and that would be a great time to read an audiobook. I personally love to read memoirs and nonfiction as audiobook, especially if the author narrates it. It's like they're telling their own story, and like you're sitting down to have coffee with them at times, and it is so much fun. So I have a couple of audiobook recommendations for you before we get into this actual stack of recommendations. I'm going to look at my list so that I don't forget. Okay, if you are a true crime type of person and you want to listen to an audiobook, The House of My Mother by Sherry Frankie was so good. It's about the Ruby Frankie case, and if you don't know what that is, just go look it up. There's a lot of coverage and media about it, but I really loved the firsthand experience of the daughter. In this case, she did a great job narrating it, and it was very entertaining and insightful, and definitely has that like true crimey-ish vibes. The next one, if you are a foodie, if you love cooking and food and eating diversely, then I recommend the Stanley Tucci audiobooks. The first one that he wrote is called Taste, and then the second one is What I Ate in a Year. I recommend reading those in order, reading Taste first and then the next one. These are so much fun memoirs, and Stanley Tucci narrates it, and it is just, it feels like he's in your living room telling you about his life growing up in Italy in an authentic Italian family, Italian food, and all the things. I loved it. Okay, if you love Gilmore Girls, you're gonna love the Lauren Graham memoirs. She has several of them, and honestly, I don't remember the order that I read them. I don't remember the order they're published, but I've listened to all of them and I love them. Lauren Graham is hilarious, and it was so entertaining to hear about her life, about how she got on Gilmore Girls and everything, and so I recommend listening to that if you love Gilmore Girls. And if you love Friends, the Matthew Perry book, I actually have the physical book, but I chose to listen to it on audio because Matthew Perry narrated it, and it was equal parts heartbreaking and funny and sad. But if you love Friends, that's a great audiobook. If you're looking for some audiobook that's fiction, the Emily Henry audiobooks are amazing. Julia Whalen, well-known narrator, and she has narrated all of Emily Henry's books. She is a great narrator and is very entertaining to listen to. So the narrator really matters to me, especially with fiction. I gotta be able to pay attention and understand what they're saying, and it's gotta not feel boring. So I recommend that. And the final recommendation for fiction would be the Richard Osman books. He wrote the Thursday Murder Club series, which I loved, and the narrator is super fun and funny and very British, and I just really liked it. If you want something sort of lighthearted and entertaining to listen to, they're my favorite audiobooks to this day. So if you need an audiobook recommendation, hopefully that spoke to you and that you got some sort of recommendation for the summer. Okay, we're finally gonna get into the book recommendations that I have for you, the ones that are in this stack. I've got 2 books per category. Just to keep it concise, I'm gonna give a brief description of what the books are, but ultimately I feel like most of these books are great to kind of not know too much going into it. Just pick it up and be surprised like I suggested. The first category is gonna be historical fiction. If you watch my channel at all, you know I love historical fiction. It does not have to be a boring, dreadful category like a lot of people think it is. It can be extremely entertaining and insightful. This is one of my favorite ways to learn, actually, is to read historical fiction. So my first recommendation is Codename Helene by Ariel Lawhon. This is a World War II historical fiction novel following a spy. Her name is Nancy Wake, and she goes by several different codenames over her career. Codename Helene is one of them. And this is a very fast-paced, almost thriller-like historical fiction to me. It kind of goes back and forth between the future and present day, and like slowly the timelines line up with how the story is told. But I could not put this down. I was flying through the pages. I read it super quickly, and that is saying something because a lot of historical fiction actually should be read a little bit slower to kind of soak it in, sort of like I was talking about earlier. But this one was so fast-paced, so if you want something very gripping and detail-oriented and it's gonna just capture your attention and you're not gonna want to put it down, I recommend Codename Helene. The second one in the historical fiction category is The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. This is my favorite historical fiction author. I've read almost all of her World War II historical fiction books except for one that I still need to get to. This is about a group of women that are working at Bletchley Park trying to break the Enigma code. I just remember there being a lot of descriptions of like summertime and how they're working in the extreme humidity, and I think it follows enough time where there's probably more than one season. But when I was looking at my shelf, I was like, this would be such a great summer read. This one is not as fast-paced as Codename Helene, but it is still equally gripping, and towards the end, as the plot is building up, it does get a bit quicker. But this is following 4 different girls, or is it 3? Yeah, it's following 3 women. So you're getting 3 different points of view and different timelines, but not necessarily in a confusing way. Sometimes points of view and timeline can make a book confusing, but this one works really well. And I really loved the learning experience of this and kind of a little bit of what it was like to work in Bletchley Circle or Bletchley Park. I actually want to reread this one hopefully soon because it was so good, and I think that it would be great for the summer. Okay, next up we've got romance. And you know, romance is not my most favorite, but I have 2 recommendations for you. One is a favorite that I have read 3 times. The other is a recent favorite that I actually finished in my last video. If you watched my last video, you're probably gonna see this coming. This is Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. I rated this book 5 stars and it pleasantly surprised me. This has everything that I like in a romance. I don't want my characters, especially in romance, to feel kind of linear and like one-dimensional. I want there to be depth and like character work done in them. And so this was a perfect summer romance for me, especially because the characters were really thought out. They were really working through something that felt human and relatable, but it was also funny. The main character reminds me of a combination of Lauren Graham in Gilmore Girls as Lorelai and also Jess from New Girl. I think those 2 people together is what Alice is like in this book. I'm not gonna say too much about it. It's a quick, fun read by the pool or at the beach kind of summer romancy book. I think that you're gonna love it. The next one is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is, to this day, my favorite Emily Henry book, and this is in the romance category because technically it is contemporary romance, but it is definitely not a super fluffy romance. This has some hard-hitting topics in it, especially topics of grief, and I just really loved it. I kind of want my heart to be ripped out a little bit when it comes to books, especially romance. Like I said, I want them to feel real and human, and I really love how the characters work through different things in this book. This is a great summer read, but it is not like super happy, bubbly romancy in the way that you think of, but I still recommend it. I love this book. Okay, next we've got literary fiction. Now, I am not the biggest literary fiction reader. There are a few books that you'll see that I consider to be literary fiction. If you're a big literary romance person, leave some recommendations in the comments about summer reading, because these are probably not what you're thinking of if you're a literary fiction girly, but to me, it's literary fiction. The first one that I've got is We Spread by Ian Reid. Now, this is following an elderly person who is struggling with Alzheimer's/dementia. It's from her perspective as she's going about life. And that's literally all I'm gonna say. It turns into something a little bit thriller-ish. There's mysterious happenings, unreliable narrator trope, all that kind of stuff. And I read this in like 2 or 3 days. So this would be a great, quick, entertaining read for the summer. Next, I've got Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I really love this book. It has a mystery element to it. There's tons of descriptions of the marshlands in the North Carolina coast. It is a perfect summer read if you want descriptions of nature and poetry, and it felt so imaginative and it made you want to go outside and enjoy nature, which I think is just a great vibe for the summertime. So this one for sure had to go on the list. Next, we've got general fiction. And again, general fiction, literary fiction, as far as my recommendations, could probably be combined because they might not be that different of categories to you if you're a literary fiction person. But the first one I have is Love and Saffron by Kim Fay. This is a very short book. I think that it's like 187 pages. So really short, you could read this in a day. This is a collection of letters, and it's between a woman who is basically just writing a fan letter to this other woman who writes for a well-known magazine, and they strike up a friendship and they talk about food and friendship and love and relationships and the hardships of life and all the things. And it was so endearing, but definitely a great summer read. There's lots of descriptions of like hot summer weather in here, and so if you want something quick, entertaining, heartfelt, you're gonna love the characters by the end of this. I think this would be a great one for you. Next in this category is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love this book. This takes place in Malibu. As the title suggests, it follows a group of siblings and their dynamic as they're trying to navigate life as a celebrity child. Like, their dad's a celebrity, they don't have a relationship with him, and it's just the sibling dynamic, each one of their lives, and all around this house in Malibu. Lots of descriptions of surfing and beach vibes and all the things that you think of as a California summer. I thought this was thoroughly entertaining. I loved the writing style. It was pretty quick and easy to read, but also something that you could be meditative about if you wanted to. I'm cheating a little bit for fantasy. I'm gonna talk about fantasy books, and out of all the categories, I feel like I've read the least fantasy because it usually doesn't hold my attention. I have a really hard time with it, but the one fantasy series I actually loved and read all of them and was excited to read them all is the Powerless series. I ate this series up, y'all. I loved it, and I can definitely see myself rereading this series. There are 3 books in the series plus a novella, and I think another novella is coming out soon if I've heard correctly. This would be a perfect summer series to binge out because last summer I read Powerless and then I had to wait for the second one, and then I had to wait for the third one to come out. But now that the trilogy is complete, you could get all these books and literally, like, depending on how fast you read, you could just binge it out super fast as far as like a couple weeks goes. I loved this series. It was fantasy enough to still be a fantasy world, but not too fantasy. It definitely was more of a romance, which, you know, you've watched my channel enough at this point to know that reading contemporary things, especially things that are more popular like on TikTok and Instagram and all the things, they don't usually speak to me. Those books don't, but this one did, and I loved it, and I will recommend it over and over. If you want a good fantasy series to read this summer, Powerless trilogy is it. We've got 2 categories left. The first one is going to be mysteries, okay? The first recommendation I've got is The Reappearance of Rachel Price. I loved this. I read this at the beach last year and I loved it for the summer. I thought that it was so good and so entertaining. It is in the mystery category more than it is gonna be in the thriller category because I feel like it was more revolving around solving this mystery. Now there are some faster paced moments. There are some creepy things happening as if it's a thriller, but the pacing of it was more like a mystery. So I'm not even gonna tell you super what this is about other than her mom disappeared and then all of a sudden she reappeared and they got to figure out what happened to her. Just know that going into it. And I think being surprised is the best policy. And next in the mysteries, We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. I talked about his other series, The Thursday Murder Club, as far as audiobooks go. Honestly, you could read them physically as well. This is a new series he's come out with. It was so good. There is world travel involved in this. There is espionage and all the kind of things that you want in a good mystery, but it was so imaginative and funny and lighthearted at the same time, but also had heartwarming moments. A great combination of all the things, and the plot was actually really good. So recommend this for the summertime. Next, we're gonna do thrillers, and this will be the last category. The first one that I've got is I Found You by Lisa Jewell. I've read so many Lisa Jewell books, and I used to be a heavy thriller girly, and I really loved Lisa Jewell books. I could read them in like 2 days. This is a British seaside coastland setting, and this mom basically lives on the coast with her kids, and this random man shows up, and so you're trying to figure out who this man is. There's another timeline where somebody's husband is missing, and so you got all these different things working together, and eventually they all tie together at the end. So if you want a really satisfying ending, I recommend I Found You, especially because it is a coastal setting, which is great for the summertime. And then the last one is The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This is the first Ruth Ware book I ever read. I actually read this when I first got back into reading in 2021, and it is perfect. It's literally perfect for summertime, and I'm saying that for all these books because I chose them specifically for a summer recommendations video. It's following a woman who is a journalist slash like reviewer of different vacation things, and so she gets asked to go on this cruise, this maiden voyage cruise, to write about it, to write about the experience for the like publications and stuff that are coming out about this cruise. Sinister things start happening while she's on the cruise. She's out at sea. It's kind of like a claustrophobic vibe because she literally can't escape. She is in the middle of the ocean, in a cabin, all the things while trying to figure out what is going on. I loved this for the summertime. I think that you're gonna like it too. All right, I've got one random tidbit to tell you at the end of these recommendations. If you love a podcast, there is a podcast called What Should I Read Next, and Modern Mrs. Darcy, that blog has been around for forever, talking about book recommendations and stuff, but this podcast is really cool because she has guests on the podcast who basically tell her all the problems of their reading life, and she kind of acts like a reading doctor. She's like, okay, you know, what's going on? Like, how can we help you figure out how to get more out of your reading life? The guest will tell her 2 books that they love and 1 book that they don't. And based on all the things they talk about at the very end, then the host of the podcast will give them 3 book recommendations, and it's all on the spot. Like, none of it is pre-done before the episode. She literally like you can hear her writing stuff down. She just comes up with like 3 books that they would like based on all the things that they talked about. It is really fun to listen to. It kind of challenges me to think differently about my reading life, especially when it comes to my habits. Stuff that you think is kind of a duh moment, but it really is helpful to hear someone else say it. So I am done rambling about that, but if you want another book recommendations type of thing, I think that you're gonna like that podcast. I'll link it below for you in case you want to check it out. That is all for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed this summer guide recommendations for 2025. I do have another video of these I did last year. The books are a little bit different, and so maybe you want to check both of those things out. Hopefully you got something out of this video, and let me know in the description what you're reading this summer. What are you reading right now? Or what are you hoping to get to in the summer? I would love to chat in the comments and talk about the books we're going to read in the next few months. I will see you in the next one. Bye, friends.